Hi, my name is Dr. Catherine Hughes from Crime Psych. Today I'm going to be talking about attitudes. The way that we think about things, be that whether it's favourably or unfavourably, depends largely on our attitude towards it. We might even feel indifferently about some things. We tend to make a set of assumptions about people, places, behaviour, in fact, pretty much anything that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the psychology of attitudes and a little bit about me. If you're watching this video and you don't know me in person, you might think, oh, a doctor, I bet she's loaded, she's stuck up, she knows what she's talking about, she probably has a team of people doing things for her. And what you think about me depends on your attitude to YouTubers, women, middle-aged women, doctors, psychologists and so on. I volunteer for the Woodland Trust, so if you met me in that context, you might think she's a tree hugger, I bet she's vegan, she probably lives in a camper van, she knows a lot about nature. Again, what you think about me then depends on what you think about those who volunteer and do nature activities. Attitude has got three components to it. It has an affective component, which is the way that we feel about something or our emotions towards it. Depending on the context that you meet me, you'll either like me or you won't. There's also the behavioural component to our attitude. Our attitude influences how we act or how we behave in various circumstances. So if you met me in my motorcycle clothes, you might avoid me or you might approach me to talk about one of the best moments that I experienced how attitude affects behaviour was at a parents' evening at my child's school. There was a snotty maths teacher who looked down her nose and introduced herself. I shook her hand and said, "Hi, I'm Dr. Hughes." They actually bowed a bit, which was quite amusing. The next component is the cognitive aspect, and that involves a person's beliefs or knowledge about something. For example, I believe all doctors are stuck up. I believe bikers are nice people. I believe bikers are dangerous people. And the stronger your attitude, the more likely it is to change that person's behaviour. There are several things that can have an impact on our attitude. How significant the attitude is for that person is related to our self-interest, our social identification and our values. So if a person sees someone or something as being like them or important to them or has a particular attribute that they like or even is an object that they'd like to have, it's extremely important to that person. So the attitude will have a very strong influence on that person's behaviour. By contrast, if a person sees somebody and is indifferent towards it or it's not important in their life, then they won't have a very strong attitude for or against that thing or person. So, for example, you might see a biker and just be indifferent to them because you don't feel strongly one way or the other about bikers. You might see somebody being accused of grooming children and hate them and feel intense disgust or disdain towards them, perhaps even feel anger towards them. On the other hand, someone might see a gang leader and be nice to them. They'll show an interest in what they're doing or they'll chat to them because they're in a position that that other person wants to be in. People are generally more knowledgeable about topics which interest them and they're likely to hold strong attitudes, whether that's positive or negative, as a consequence to that. Attitudes that are based on direct experience are more strongly held and influence behaviour more than attitudes formed indirectly. So, for example, you hear something through hearsay or you're reading something or watching the television. So, what's that got to do with criminal psychology? I hear you screaming with frustration. The more that we know about attitudes, the more successful we're going to be in challenging and changing those attitudes. And that could be useful in rehabilitation programs or in community messages about knife crime or gang crime. We, as humans, like predictable. We like the comfort of being able to accurately predict what's likely to happen. We use attitudes to provide consistency and stability in our lives, and it gives us a sense of control. To use myself as an example, If you were to meet me as a psychologist and I said, oh, for F's sake, what the F is going on? You'd probably be fairly shocked and fairly surprised. However, if you met me as a biker and I came out with some profanities, then you're not likely to be as shocked by that. We also express our attitude to other people because it helps to communicate who we are and gives us a sense of identity. So if a person wears a Liverpool football top, you can bet your bottom dollar that they don't like those who support Everton, and vice versa, of course. Therefore, our attitudes are part of our identity, and they help us to be aware through the expression of our feelings, beliefs, and values. Attitudes are very much about being part of a social group. We feel favourably about those who have similar attitudes to us, and we feel unfavourably about those who hold opposing attitudes. Again, think about the person wearing a Liverpool or an Everton top. The responses can be either verbal or non-verbal. We can use attitude in quite defensive ways too. So, for example, if someone isn't very academic or has no formal qualifications, they might develop a negative attitude towards educational settings or those people who work within them. If a child isn't very good at sports, they might develop a negative attitude to sport in general. Whilst this may sound straightforward so far, let's remember that we're talking about humans being all humany. We can change our mind, we can be indecisive, we can change our attitudes depending on our experiences. For example, if a person is strongly against abortion and then they are raped and become pregnant as a result of that, they may well change their attitude towards abortion to be more flexible and adaptable for them. Several theories have been developed to try and give a flexible framework for what influences our behaviour. One of these is called the theory of reasoned action, and that proposes that behaviour occurs as a result of attitude and behavioural intention. There are three general constructs within that theory: attitude, behavioural intention, and subjective norm. We've just discussed what attitude is, but behavioural intention refers to the motivational factors that influence any given behaviour, where the stronger the intention to perform a particular behaviour, the more likely the behaviour will be performed. Subjective norms refer to the belief that an important person or group of people will approve and support a particular behaviour. Subjective norms are determined by the perceived social pressure from other people for an individual to behave in certain ways or motivate them to comply with those people's views. The theory of reasoned action proposes that behavioural intention depends on the person's attitude towards that behaviour and, of course, the subjective norm as well. It suggests that attitude is the belief about the consequences of performing the behaviour. Subjective norm is the perceived expectations from other people or groups which that person is going to be influenced by. So by combining these two components, it produces behavioural intention, which is defined as how likely that person is to perform a particular behaviour. However, attitude and subjective norms are not weighted equally, and some individuals will vary on how much weight is given to each component. That initial theory was then built upon, and as a result, there came the theory of planned behaviour, and that also considers perceived behavioural control as well as the other components that we've just discussed. The theory of reasoned action was developed to explain those situations where people intended to carry out a particular behaviour, but that behaviour doesn't occur due to lack of confidence or due to lack of self-control. I can think of one now: diets. The theory of planned behaviour suggests that it's possible to predict behaviour through attitude, subjective norm, behavioural intention, and perceived behavioural control. And this theory means that we can assume that any consistency in behaviour will be reflected in a person's attitude. Any preference for behaviour or interaction type evident in a person's attitude are likely to be demonstrated and reflected across various contexts and situations. Simply being in a different situation shouldn't have an impact on these deeply rooted beliefs and preferences. So these types of theories and studies have meant that we do now have a better understanding of what influences our behaviour or attitude to be positive or negative. Understanding why offenders behave or act in certain ways is a really important step in being able to change them and reduce the likelihood of that person being involved in another crime. And one way that this is being used fairly successfully is restorative justice. I'll use the example of Burglar Bob. Burglar Bob has been sent to prison for carrying out a number of house break-ins. When Bob enters the house, he goes in through the back door so that he isn't seen. He starts with the kitchen, emptying the cupboards, looking for cash and car keys. He checks pockets or coats along the way. He passes through a living room and has a quick look around for any watches, keys, gaming consoles or phones or iPads. He then goes into the bedroom and empties the drawers looking for money or jewellery. He only wants to pick up fairly small items, and he'll take the ones that he can easily carry and have the highest value. He leaves the house the same way that he entered. He takes the family car to make a quick getaway and dumps it 2 miles away. Then he sells on the goods and makes his money. None of that was personal to him. He didn't stop to think about the figurine that he broke, which was a beloved antique passed down from 2 generations. He didn't stop to think about how the occupants would feel about having somebody go through their things and take their belongings. He didn't stop to wonder how Mr. Smith was going to get to work the next day because now he's got no car. But restorative justice gives the victims of crime the opportunity to tell the perpetrators of crime how they feel and how that crime has impacted on them. They can explain how it's impacted them, how it made them feel. They can seek assurances that it won't happen again and agree on how to put things right. Most victims of crime want to know, why me? And restorative justice helps people who've committed crimes to recognise the harm and the distress that they've caused. Bob wouldn't have given a second thought to the person whose house that he burgled, but when he's faced with these people that he caused them harm and upset and they're telling him how he felt, he'll then have a better understanding of how his actions affect others. In some cases, restorative justice has led to a significant drop in reoffending. Finally, just before you go, so you're not left wondering what I'm really like or who I really am, this is who I am. I'm a single mum with 2 grown boys. I'm middle-aged, slightly overweight and too tired to care. I'm highly inquisitive. You could call it nosy. I come from a working class family in Liverpool. I live on a housing estate. I'm determined and I love learning. I hurt literally everywhere on my body because of injuries that I've accumulated over the years on motorbikes. I swear, sometimes, fairly often. I love being alone or out with my dog. I value people and happiness over money or success. I'm never impressed by how much money or how famous a person is. I'm close with my family. I'm emotionally and physically close with them. I do all of my work from home in a bedroom, which I've converted into an office. I write, edit and produce all of my content and do all of my own marketing, which I'm learning as I go. I love helping people. I love being outdoors. I'm passionate about reducing my waste and my carbon footprint. Now, what other people think about me doesn't change or affect how I feel about myself. So now you can accurately develop a positive or negative attitude towards me. So I do hope that you found this video interesting on attitudes, and I do hope that you've learned something new from it. Thanks for watching then. Bye for now.